And
Right.
I preach that message now all over the country saying, hey, look, I'm not trying to convince you
Mm-hmm.
that you have to do it the way that I did it,
Mm-hmm.
but I am going to do my best to help you understand the
Mm-hmm.
field that you're playing on
Mm-hmm.
and how you might be able to look to play on a different field and
Mm-hmm.
what you should look for when looking to play on that other field.
Welcome to Leadership Sovereignty with Ralph Owens and Terry Baylor. Today, Larry Cheatham discusses the significance of planning and execution in achieving financial success. He describes the disparities in wealth in America and the concept of financial intelligence and economic freedom.
In other words, is seed work
Exactly.
over time
That's
Exactly.
right.
and harvest.
That's
You
right.
know,
That's right.
and
That's right. That's
so
right.
we're gonna put some work in there,
Yeah.
along the way. Again, we don't ultimately get to the result
Hey,
without
hey, hey,
putting in.
in that time, there's a whole,
Whole
hey,
lot of things happen.
it's a whole lot. You got to start slicing that thing up. It's a lot of details in that time.
That's
It's
right.
reading.
Yes.
It's reading.
Yes.
It's getting
That's right.
mentored.
That's right.
It's, it's failing
That's right.
and learning,
That's right.
right? Failing is a part of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what I do, we use the term plan, do, check, adjust.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Plan, do,
Remember that?
check, adjust. You
Yeah.
go into things with a plan,
Mm-hmm.
and then oftentimes throughout people's lives, first of all, many people never start with a plan. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and they just go do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you begin with a plan and then go do the plan that you actually, and that's the other challenge, that sometimes people come up with the best laid plans and never take any action. And
Mm-hmm.
so we go plan, then we do. But then of those few people that do that,
Mm-hmm.
then they oftentimes will not check.
Mm.
Okay, let's look at the results.
That's right.
We've all heard the saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wondered who said that. I know who was credited with it. I believe Albert Einstein was credited with it, but there's no real evidence that he ever said it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first real publication, I believe, is Alcoholics Anonymous. That actually put that in print. Anyway, that's a rabbit trail though. So anyway, check our results, and then what adjustments need to be made. Plan, do, check, adjust, and make those adjustments. As you make the adjustments, go do,
Mm-hmm.
and then check. Are there other, because fine tune adjustments, just 2 degrees off, and
Mm-hmm.
you know this, Ralph,
Yes.
having been in the Navy. Can you imagine being 2 degrees off the direction
Mm.
on all that water that you want to go?
You can completely miss your
Where that can
destination.
take
Yeah. You
you know.
completely miss your destination completely. Yeah.
That's
Over
right.
time. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
But if you catch it early,
That's right.
right? Oh man, I love this. If you catch it early, the adjustment is much smaller.
That's
Right.
right. That's right.
Right.
Actually, I heard a story about how that principle was implemented into cars. Now, think about it, right? A car has a computer. It's reading, certain parameters. It has to have a feedback mechanism so it knows how to adjust itself to get maximum performance, right?
Right.
You're just basically saying the same thing, with ourselves. And you're so true. That's so true what you said, Larry. A lot of people do, but they never take the time to check. They never take the time to compare their results against the goal and, okay, what adjustments do I need to make? Sometimes those adjustments comes in the form of mentors, right? Who are actually can look from the outside in and say, I see you doing this, but you may need to tweak that, right? So bringing that, we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I want to give you a life example that I talk about all the time, with people that I'm working with, trying to help them find their way out. Now I'll elaborate on what that means. But we watched at least for me, I watched my parents go get what was quote unquote a good job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they worked for years and then retired and lived on a very tight and still do live on a very tight fixed income.
Mm-hmm.
I watched all of my friends, their parents, same thing. Some of them went to school, got really good educations, and retired and lived on a fixed income. I even know some that to this day, in their 70s and 80s, still going to a job.
Mm.
And we come along, and when I say we, it's first my generation, and I'm Generation X,
Mm-hmm.
but then you have generations after me. You got this, I guess I lose all the letters, Y and
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z,
Mm-hmm.
and we're watching
Mm-hmm.
those who've come before. And so my generation, some of them are getting closer and closer now to retirement
Mm-hmm.
and can't. And that's
Right.
the definition of insanity,
Mm-hmm.
that we're watching and we're doing the same thing that those before us have done.
Yep.
And we're not making any course corrections. We were talking about this before, that total wealth in the United States is about just over $198 trillion.
Mm.
Just over 198 trillion. And out of $198 trillion, if you look, 5% of the population controls the majority of that. If
Mm.
you take 95% of the population of that $198 trillion to wealth,
Mm-hmm.
they only control about 9.92 trillion.
Wow. Wow.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And that 95% that only controls 9.92 trillion,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you, the data shows that they all work jobs.
Mm-hmm.
They're employees, they receive a W-2,
Mm-hmm.
or they run S-type businesses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in my view,
I'm sorry, Larry. Can you define what S-type businesses are?
self-employed.
Okay, self-employed.
Self-employed.
Okay.
And I stole that from Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in my view, Terry, in my view, Ralph, that if I'm looking and I see that 95% of the people in this country only control 5% of the wealth,
Yeah.
and I see that they all do the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking,
Yes.
what does the 5% do
That's right.
that control 95% of the wealth? And can I do what they do?
Yeah.
If that's where 95% of the wealth is, why in the world would I continue to do what the 95% have been
Right.
doing?
Right.
And
Right.
I preach that message now all over the country, saying, hey, look, I'm not trying to convince you
Mm-hmm.
that you have to do it the way that I did it,
Mm-hmm.
but I am going to do my best to help you understand the
Mm-hmm.
field that you're playing on,
Mm-hmm.
and how you might be able to look to play on a different field, and
Mm-hmm.
what you should look for when looking to play on that other field.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's and that's a perfect transition into the new topic, which is financial intelligence and economic freedom. So, Larry, you introduced me to this concept. This concept completely changed my life. It changed the trajectory because, like you, after understanding this principle, I had to ask myself, okay, what am I doing and where am I going and where do I want to go? So I had to change some things. But talk to us about ESBI and the cash flow quadrant, because I think what you're talking about kind of ties directly into that.
Yeah, yeah. And so Robert Kiyosaki, what he authored in his books, see, and as far as I know, I believe Robert Kiyosaki had 3 books on the New York Times bestsellers list at the same time, at number 1, 2, and 3,
Mm.
which is absolutely brilliant if that's in fact accurate. I'm not 100% certain of that, but I'm pretty confident. But anyway, in my opinion, his best book was the Cash Flow Quadrant. And one of the things he points out in that book is that there are 4 ways that people make money. Either you make your money on the left side of that quadrant as an employee, or someone who is self-employed, where we've been trained to trade our time for money. And it's neither good or bad. It's just the way that it works. Most people go to work and they don't work for an hour, and their employer say, you know what, just because I like you, I'm going to pay you for 20 hours. I know you only worked an hour, but I'll pay you for 20. Usually doesn't work that way,
Mm-hmm.
And so we have an agreement. And if your employer says, I'm not going to pay you, you usually say, well, I'm not coming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the other way around too.
Mm-hmm.
If you say I'm not coming, they say, well, I'm not paying you.
Right.
But self-employed is really not any different, right? If you talk to your small business owners, your private practice physicians, your private practice attorney, what they usually would tell you is that they're usually the first ones to show up to their businesses. Restaurant owner, Usually the first one to show up to their business. Usually the last one to leave. And in many instances, probably the last one to get paid. So it's still a trading of the time for money. Now, on that other side, you have what's called, Kiyosaki referred to it as B-type businesses in the I quadrant, investor quadrant. And again, I laugh oftentimes because people say, that's me. I'm in the investor quadrant. You are in the investor quadrant if you are, in fact, a multimillionaire.
Mm-hmm.
If you, in fact, can lose $500,000 and you're not insolvent.
Mm-hmm.
If that is you, congratulations. You are in the I quadrant, but most people are not.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the people who make it to the I quadrant, most of them come from the B quadrant, the B type business, big business systems. And here's the big difference. The big difference between the B type business and the S type business is the B type business focus is the development of leaders and the leveraging of systems. And it's a massive difference in the two.
Thanks for tuning into Leadership Sovereignty. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to follow, like, and share. Your support helps us keep the conversation going. Until next time, lead with purpose and God bless.